Hello and welcome to Retro Workshop. In today's video I'm taking a look at one of the wheels of steel. It's the iconic Technics 1210 record deck, and this one's a bit poorly, it's blowing fuses, so join me as I take a look under the hood. The Technics SL1210 record deck was first released in 1972 and was refined over the years. This is a Mark II unit, the 1210 indicating it's the black variant. They're built like tanks and have great shock absorbers, making them ideal for use in nightclubs. There's a pitch fader with which you can fine-tune the speed of the record. This makes the 1210 a firm favourite with DJs who use a pair of decks to match the tempo of two tracks and mix them seamlessly together. And this fine example was brought to the workshop by an old colleague, Mark, and from the rear plate I can see that this is a 1210 Mark II and there's a dash A at the end of it. Now I've downloaded the service manual, of which there's a few supplements, and one of those supplements does indicate that the dash A means that there's a different circuit inside, and as well I think a different bottom mechanical plate, so I'll have to be mindful of that as we go along. Anyway, let's start pulling it apart and see what we can find. And the first step is to remove this platter, and that will reveal part of the direct drive motor. There is a magnet on the rear of the platter. And just a quick check of the voltage selector here, and it is indeed set to 240 volts, which is correct for here in the UK. And to get inside, just need to remove a few screws on this top plastic plate. So what have we got inside? Well, the mains comes in through this cable onto this little circuit board, where it goes through a fuse, through the voltage selection switch, through the primary side of the transformer. The secondary side of the transformer is coming out on these yellow wires, where it goes through another fuse and onto the main PCB. We've got a bridge rectifier, a smoothing capacitor, I think that's a regulator over here, voltage regulator, and we've got some ICs for the quartz control of the frequency and the motor drive. We've got some wires coming off the side here to go to the variable speed control fader, and there's an LED which indicates 0%. We've got a little pop-up light here which illuminates the side of the platter, and over here start, stop, speed control and the main on and off switch. So let's just confirm what Mark tells me, and that's that it's blowing this fuse here on the secondary side of the transformer, the low voltage side. So I'll pop in another time delay T 1 amp fuse and plug it in and gingerly switch it on. Oh yeah, we saw a little flash there. So I've got my multimeter out and going very carefully across the secondary of the transformer. I'm getting about 32 volts AC, which sounds quite reasonable without any load. So I think that the transformer is okay. Next I need to remove the main PCB to more easily check out the components. Okay, so I'm nearly there. There's just two wires that are soldered on here and they're wire wrapped round, so I'm going to have difficulty getting them off, so I'm actually going to snip them off and can always solder them back on at the end. And with the board out, time to start pulling out components to check them, and I'm going to start again concentrating in the power supply section with this bridge rectifier. I had to first move the leg of a capacitor out of the way, but I made light work of desoldering the bridge rectifier with my new Engineer solder sucker, which I can certainly recommend. There are 4 diodes inside the plastic package, and each diode can be tested with the multimeter. Each pair of legs should conduct in one direction only, and you should get about half a volt drop. However, one pair of legs conducted in both directions, suggesting that the diode has gone short circuit. So I've had a rummage in my box of diodes and I've got a bridge rectifier. It's not quite as chunky as this one, but I've done a bit of Googling, and a 1210 requires something with about 1.5 amps rated current. So we'll pop it in, give it a go, and if it fixes the problem, I'll order up something a bit chunkier. I noticed this little black wire had snapped off, so I've reconnected it, and it's quite important because it connects the isolated 0 volts to the chassis, which is probably important for noise immunity. And I cleaned off the old thermal grease from the voltage regulator and applied some more. This device is one of 3 in the power supply circuit. These components are next on the list of things to check if the new bridge rectifier doesn't fix the turntable. I then soldered the low voltage AC leads back onto the main board before plugging it in and powering it up. And success. So before I get too excited, I thought I'd better check it with a real record and see that I can get some audio out of the thing. Now, there's no audio circuitry as such. The signal is picked up by the stylus and sent out the back straight onto a couple of wires, normally terminated in a couple of phonos. This one seems to have this 3-pin XLR plug fitted. So I've made a bodge lead to break out to the usual stereo phono and ground wire, which stops hum pickup. And let's give it a go. Okay, so it's sounding good, although I'm sure from my recollection a 1210 should stop sooner than that, and indeed there are a few words in the service manual. Brake adjustment, there's a procedure for adjusting the time it takes to stop, and it should stop within 90 degrees. So I'm going to have a quick look back under the cover and see if we can improve it. It's VR201 on the board, marked up as brake, so I'm just going to give that a very, very slight twiddle clockwise, and of course I've got to put the cover back on in order to check it out. And I'd say after that small tweak, it's a bit quicker stopping. And a couple of days later, a new bridge rectifier arrived. I just had to bend the legs in, taking care to ensure that the 4 diodes in the package were correctly orientated. As part of any service, it's recommended that you re-lubricate the motor shaft, so I first cleaned it with some IPA. Then added a few drops of 3-in-1 oil, applied using the tip of a screwdriver to direct the oil and ensure I don't overdo it. And now for a thorough clean-up. This 1210 is in a pretty grubby state with dust and grime on every part. The tone-arm base is particularly bad as there's some grease that's leaked out of the assembly for the dust to stick to. I start by cleaning the surfaces with a mild detergent spray and microfiber cloth. Using a brush on plastic surfaces. And a toothbrush and cream cleaner on the edge of the metal platter. I used an air duster to remove the worst of the debris from the pitch fader and tone arm base. And after removing the counterweight, it's back to careful cleaning with a cloth and some Q-tips to get into all the tight corners. Finally, the 1210 is in a presentable state and the stylus can go back on. But I've just noticed another problem. The little pop-up light called the target light isn't working. You can still buy the original lamps, but they're quite expensive at around £40. So I ordered up a modern LED replacement. This one comes on a nice little PCB with the required resistor,
and a 3D printed plastic surround. To change the lamp, the base of the 1210 needs to come off. I've put a block of wood underneath so the weight isn't bearing down on the tone arm.
Now, working on this fine machine reminds me of my Technics 1210 owning days back in the early 2000s when I was interested in going clubbing and house music. Funky house 2002 to 2006 was my thing. It all went a bit downhill and a bit electro after that. Anyway, I was asked to DJ in a small club just a few doors down from Fabric in London, and I had a great time. Really enjoyed it, as did I think everyone else in the crowd from the smiles on their faces. And there's 4 more screws, one hidden under each of the feet, and the easiest way to get at those is just to unscrew the feet to access the screw.
It's a bit fiddly getting the rubber base off. You just need to unpick it from the metal inner base, then persuade it off. You can now make out the rest of the electronics, including the audio and ground connection cables, the PCB for the pitch fader, and the buttons that control the speed and the main power switch. And here's the pop-up lamp holder. And to replace the lamp, I first need to cut this cable tie. This resistor is no longer needed as I'm using an LED lamp. So that's also removed. 2 more screws, and the lamp assembly just pulls out of the chassis. 1 tiny screw later, and the lamp cover slides off to reveal the lamp with its white plastic base. The lamp comes out with wires attached, so these also need to be cut. Then the lamp and wires are slid out. The replacement lamp wires need a bit of coaxing through the shaft using some tweezers. You need to remember to refit the grey rubber sleeving to the new lamp, as this protects the wires around the bend in the mechanism. You can see that this LED lamp has red and black wires, and the polarity is important. The black wire needs to be soldered onto the switch, and the red wire, the positive connection, to the orange wire. And I've added some heat shrink sleeving to insulate the connection. Finally, a new cable tie, and the wires are tucked safely inside the unit. With the 1210 reassembled, time for a test, and it seems to be working perfectly. The service manual refers to this lamp as the stylus illuminator, and you can see it does just that. And this LED replacement has a warm glow like the original lamp. As well as adding to the drama of putting a record on, the lamp came in very useful when DJing at parties and in dark nightclubs, to help identify the start of a track.
And it's looking pretty good. There's a few scratches here and there. I think it's fair to say this machine has been well used, and it's certainly lived its life without the Perspex dust cover that would have come with it originally. Slip mat on the other hand, well, that one's gone in the bin. It was a bit knackered, so I'll pop a fresh one on. Now, I've got a few hours until Mark collects this fine machine, so I can enjoy a few of my old records. I'm not going to bother setting the tracking weight here. Obviously that might shift in transit. Also, it's a bit of a personal preference thing. Audiophiles like to set it just so. You've probably seen Techmoan over on his channel with his miniature scales. DJs, on the other hand, well, they like to whack on as much weight as possible so that the stylus doesn't jump out of the groove when they're back cueing. Well, that's it for this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do consider subscribing. Bye for now.